So we have three artists showcased in the Hopeful Visions exhibit: Cheryl Schlencker, Merle Weismer, and Patricia Danzon. Each artist will be presenting in turn, and after all the artists are presented, we will open up for questions from you, the audience. If you see any pieces you are interested in for purchase, please visit the MediaArtsCouncilGallery.org website or look in the chat box where I've shared a link. Next month, please save the date for March 13th at 4 p.m. for our complete gallery artist show entitled Pieces of Our Lives, where each gallery artist is sharing 3 pieces that are especially important to them in this time. To begin with, we have Cheryl Schlencker. Cheryl Schlencker has been an artist all her life. She looks for inspiration in the bright colors and light of the natural world, as well as in everyday activities. Just as stars cannot be seen in daytime, one needs to embrace the darkness to appreciate light. In this exhibition, Cheryl is trying to portray the idea of embracing hope and visualizing what it means as we search for a way out of the dark days we have been facing. She has created 9 pieces that touch on this hopeful vision.
Thank you, Jared. And thank you all for zooming in today. I am Cheryl Schlencker, and like Jared said, I have 9 of my recent paintings that I'd like to share with you. I've divided them into 3 categories: the garden, landscape, and still lifes. These themes move from representational to abstract, although my abstract paintings have a base in reality, so they're actually abstractions. I enjoy painting a number of different subject matters, but I chose some that relate to our theme, hopeful vision. The first group is gardens. The garden is such a strong metaphor for hope. People put a seed in the dead ground and rightfully expect magic to happen, and it does. The first piece, you can highlight the first piece now, is called Garden Party, and it is a celebration of the early garden. The lime green is a color of spring to me, and we're so happy to see the new plants when they come up, even the new stems and the formation of leaves, and they dance with the individual blooms in this painting. This painting is acrylic on canvas, and it's 16 by 20. When I say 16 by 20, I mean 16 tall and 20 wide. The second piece, the next painting, is called Garden Riot. And here we are moving into the hot colors of high summer. The blooms are actually clouding each other, fighting for attention and reaching for that blue sky. There might even be some weeds trying to intrude. Although it is abstract, I rendered the white flower in the lower center to keep things grounded. This is also acrylic on canvas. It's smaller, it's 12 by 12. And the last piece in this group is called Garden Thoughts. We're now moving into the more subdued colors representing the fading of summer and the calming relief from the heat. There's a suggestion of the shapes of autumn leaves as well in there. And although the colors are subdued, you can see we have plenty of life left to enjoy. This is acrylic on an artificial paper called UPO that's made of plastic. And it has a 3-inch mat around it and is framed. It's 25 inches by 29 inches. And now we move on to our second group. There are 3 of them, and the group is landscape. And it'll come up any second. Those 3 in the middle. I'm lucky enough to have easy access to wooded areas and hiking trails. And getting outside in a natural setting helps me feel hopeful and appreciative of life. The first image is right there coming up. Can you show them the images one by one? Oh, we got it. Okay, it's not on mine. I'm sorry. I am so drawn to trees, really. They're one of my favorite species. They stand tall like giant witnesses to everything, and they make no judgment. A singer named John Gorka has a wonderful song called Branching Out. And the first line is, when I grow up, I want to be a tree. I love that song, and you might want to check it out. This painting is called Fractured Light because of the way that light is always changing moment by moment. When you are in a forest, the shadows move, colors change, wind blows, snow falls, birds sing. Somebody stop me. It's acrylic on canvas, and it's 16 by 20. The next image, we are now moving from representational to more stylized and abstract. I cut out horizontal strips from older paintings and pasted them together onto a painted surface. I tried to give it a woven feeling, and I titled it Tapestry. There are trees. We start at the bottom and lead us up into a more urban area through fences and parkland. After the buildings of the city, the countryside opens up again through farmland and then up to the sky. This is acrylic on paper, and it's matted. It's got collage on it, and it is 17 by 14. And the last image is, we're now completely into the city and very abstract. And this painting I call urban. There are no trees, unless you can see any, which is fine. The geometric shapes and seemingly haphazard lines represented life downtown. I drew in some pencil lines to portray a skyline in the background. And skyline always seems to be an ever-present feeling in my impression of urban existence. This is on paper, and it's framed to a size of 17 by 21. And then we go to our last group of 3. Although the theme of this last group is still life, I think of it as my last resort. I paint regularly, and inspiration doesn't always come regularly. You can't count on it to come when just because you have a brush in your hand and you're looking at a blank canvas. Some days, especially these days when we've been cooped up for too long and the weather is nasty and the coffee's all gone and everything in the house looks so boring and gray, what do I paint? Usually I'll just pour some paint onto a surface and see what it says to me. Sometimes it says a shoreline or a figure or street scene or music groups or tropical landscape or chicken. So these 3 paintings happened that way. The first one is called Red Blooms. And it happened when I covered the whole canvas with dark green and then carved out some of the shapes by painting around them. And they turned into leaves. The red flowers just begged to be added. And I don't even know what they are. They might be begonias or they might be geraniums. And then I tried a million colors in the background, but the yellow seemed to me to represent a sunny window. And this poor plant was really reaching for a sunny window. It's 12 by 12 on canvas. The middle painting, the second painting in this group, the pot in this painting was trying to hold its own against the wild blooming leaves. So I entitled it Terracotta, just to give it a little cred. I set this in front of a window as well, because I think that potted plants really want to be outside. They're just looking out that window, waiting for summer, when they can go out on the patio perhaps. It's actually painted on top of another painting that I didn't like so much. So it has a secret story to tell. I also gave the terracotta pot a fancy companion to talk to. And this is acrylic on canvas, 12 by 12. The last painting. So it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. I wanted to show how even cut flowers can bring some joy into a gray day. Though they're eventually going to die, they do enjoy that period of glory. I used cut out pieces of old paintings again, and I found some colors and shapes that work together here better than they did on the original work. So here the roses triumph over the shadows on the wall, and I entitled this piece Wall Flowers. This is a collage on paper, and it's matted and framed, and it's 19 by 19. No plants were harmed in the production of this series. Those are my 9 pieces. And the problem that I wanted to talk about is a virtual exhibit. You can't see them as they're framed. You can't tell what sizes they are. So if you can switch to me in the main thing, I can show you the paintings on the wall, how they appear. And I'll bring one up close so that you can see what a matted painting looks like. Here I go. Oh, that's our phone. Turn it off. Yes. Oops, sorry. So this is what it looks like when a painting is matted. And these are all my paintings in a row there. And that's the end.
Oh, there we go.
Wonderful. So we'll carry right on to Merle. And then at the end, we'll have time for people to ask any questions they want of any of the artists. All right. Our next gallery artist is Merle Weismer. Merle Weismer is a graduate of Moore College of Art and Design, Philadelphia, PA, with a BFA in textile arts. She wove large tapestries for 15 years. Now scaling down, her work has morphed into one-of-a-kind off-loom sculptural neck pieces. Weismer works with a fashion designer in California, where her neck pieces are created for Fashion Week, New York City, 2 times a year. Many of the materials used are unconventional or repurposed, like sari silk, old refrigerator tubing, or window screen. Merle believes that art is everywhere. Merle, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jared. And I'd like to welcome everyone for taking time out of your day to come to our virtual show. I'm a real newcomer in media and a real newcomer. And so many of you are the first ones that I even know since I moved here in the late part of the summer. Anyway, the first image that we're looking at are a series of long upper length beads that I made. And while the colorful beads that you see are conventional beads that I made, the other beads around them are actually scoring beads from a pool hall. And when we don't have the pandemic, I live in flea markets. They're incredibly inspirational for me because you can find something that was used for one purpose and use it for something else. And for me, there's no better diving board for creativity. Next slide. This is cotton linen eyelash yarn that is wrapped around wire and rubber. And then I use sari silk. Sari silk, silk just dyes beautifully, and it's readily available now. And this is nothing like silk to really perform and show a beautiful color. And so this is just a real sculptural piece, and the wire is meant to be bent. I say that about all my pieces because your clavicle or your neckline is going to be different than someone else's. So they're meant to be shaped to your body. Next slide. This is around the choker part is sari silk. And the middle, we're looking at hand-dyed cocoons. Now, these are the cocoons after the silk has been spun. And this is the humane way of using the cocoon. In a lot of places, what they do is they just boil the cocoons with the moth inside. And when they spin them from big vats. But when you do it that way, you kill the moth and then they can't reproduce. So this particular company opens up the cocoon and then allows the moth to come out so that they can reproduce. And they look really delicate, but they are so strong. And I often say you could back up a truck over the shells, and if you move away, they'll pop back up into a circular shape. So I have to put a disclaimer on some of my pricing to say, don't be afraid to wear this because they're really strong, as they're home to the moth, and they're very sturdy, and I just love working with them. Next slide. I started using fishing floats or fishing bobbers, vintage ones, and I love the shape of them, and I can't get enough of these. And I spent all my time on eBay looking for old ones. And so these are fishing floats that are covered in yarn, and then I enhance them with felt balls. And I love the idea these days of working with very long pendants. And I think that this looks great with the neckline of the vest. And so it's interesting to be able to create a piece for a certain line or length to the clothing. Next slide. And this is a real minimalist piece using 3mm gray felt, very soldiered with a bead at the bottom. And the thick rubber that you see underneath, or actually above the gray, is actually rubber from spear fishing. There's different kinds of rubbers, and they have different textures and a different feel to them, and they're really fun to work with. So I like to vary the size of the rubber. And this is just a real architectural piece. And the fashion designer that I work with, her clothing is very architectural. There's not a lot of pattern, but there's a lot of texture. And if any of you are familiar with the show called Frankie and Grace with Lily Tomlin wears her clothing. Mm-hmm. And every time I turn on the show, I'm always waiting to see if she'll wear one of my pieces. I think I would fall over if I saw that, but it hasn't happened yet. But if you're familiar with that kind of very alternative dress, that is the kind of clothing that I designed for. Next slide. This is a black on black piece. And what we're looking at in the center is it's about a 3-inch hand blown disc. And it looks like it's etched, but the actual technique is called batuto. And it's a type of etching. It's kind of hard to explain, but it actually looks like it's carved. And I love the idea of black on black. So you have the elastic wire, the elastic that's wrapped around the wire, which gives one texture. And then you have the two different textures in the black. Next slide. This is another minimalist black on black piece. And I've used old refrigerator tubing. And again, I'm mixing my rubbers. I have wooden beads. So you have a lot of sheen, and sheen is definitely a texture. And when you look at all the different textures that the rubber and the beads make, it just adds a lot of interest to a piece. And you can see that if you had it on a black garment, you can see that it wouldn't really disappear, but it would actually show up like this. Next slide. And here, I really love window screen. And after flea markets, Home Depot is my second favorite place to go. And so the window screen for me acts like lace. And so when you can sandwich objects in between the layers of the window screen, it gives a wonderful texture and a little more depth to whatever it is working with. And I like using cardboard, and there's some felt in there. And this has been kind of a fun series. And I also want to mention that when I do work with the fashion designer, people have a tough time visualizing how things are going to look together. So she has mannequins in her showroom, but she also has her clothing line lined on one side, and then she'll have the jewelry lined on the other side. And so when the boutique owners are buying things for Fashion Week, we play and we kind of put things together. And lots of times the jewelry sells the outfit. and sometimes the outfit sells the jewelry. So it's a real symbiotic relationship, but it gives people a chance to visualize how the jewelry will look with the garment. Next slide, please. This is wrapped sari silk, and it's rather thick, and silk is rather expensive. So the underlayment of the sari silk, I actually use t-shirt yarn. And in the textile industry, we are all very cognizant of fabric waste because it ends up in a landfill and it's very problematic for the environment. So I'm always buying odds and ends that I can so that it doesn't end up in the ground. So this sari silk, I love the idea of the negative space and the knots. And on the sort of the right side is the closure. And I really believe that the closure should be part of the art. Next slide, please. This is a series that I did with 3mm felt in strips. And this is it's just a great thickness of felt to work with. It's very hard to work with, and it has a very lyrical quality to it. And it's very strong, and I enjoy using black, white, and red. I could use black, white, and red forever. And the armature on which it is mounted is, again, the rubber wire covered with rubber, yes. And so it really gives a very interesting effect. And once again, all these pieces are meant to be bent. So it will conform to your body once you begin to wear it. Next slide. And once again, another sculptural type of piece. I love using black and white and black and white and black and white. I think it's very striking. And when you use black and white together like this, I really think that it has a way of anchoring a piece to your body. I don't even really know how to explain why, but it's very striking when it's on. And I like that I can use the choker to kind of manipulate the shapes around the piece. Next slide. And I think this might be the last one. I really enjoy repurposing. And this one these are antique Bakelite belt buckles. And Bakelite was a certain type of a plastic that was used back in the 30s and 40s. And I love it. And when I find it, I try to do something with it. So here I took black hemp, many, many strands of black hemp, and I wove them through the buckles, and it gives a really interesting effect. And I love wearing this piece. It's just illuminates the face, and none of my pieces are heavy. And I believe this might be the last piece. So I want to encourage people that if you live in the area of media, and I have lots of stuff in my studio right now because I had several shows that have been canceled, like Fashion Week was canceled. Come on over and you can try things on and play. And I'd love to meet you. And that is the end of my show.
Thank you, Merle. That was wonderful. Next, our final artist this afternoon is Patricia Danzon. Patricia Danzon is a photographer. Her style and subjects are eclectic, both local and global. The common theme is the use of light, line, texture, and color to show the simplicity and wonder in our world. The pandemic lockdown inspired her to visit local parks and nature preserves in search of photographic opportunities and hiking trails. She is showing some of this work in this February show and hopes it will inspire others to enjoy the beauty of this area. She prints her own work using archival inks and papers and can print custom sizes on request. Patricia, go ahead.
Thank you, Jared. Yes, as Jared said, I normally do my photography when I'm traveling as well as locally. That the traveling has not been an option for the last year. And so I have been more inspired to go out and find opportunities when I'm out hiking, and it's led me to explore trails and parks I wasn't otherwise familiar with. So the first three are shots taken in the area around the Schuylkill River, where the Perkiomen Creek joins the Schuylkill River out near Valley Forge. This is an area where there is a lot of old historic building from the 19th and early 20th century. This is a bridge over the Schuylkill, and I was very drawn by the symmetry of the arches that is then reflected in the river. At this time of year, you get very good reflections. It was in the fall, and of course the trees are bare, and so it's sort of framed by the twigs. Next slide. Adjacent to the Schuylkill River is the Schuylkill Canal, built in the 19th century, and it must have had substantial industrial traffic on it, because this is the lock keeper's house. So whoever lived here managed the lock on the canal, and I just loved the colors and the symmetry of the windows, the geometry, and the 3 rows of windows. They get smaller as you go up, so obviously 3 floors and then a ground floor underneath. A quite substantial residence. Looks a bit like a doll's house, but very substantial in reality, and a nice bit of history out there. Next slide. This is a more domestic scene on the Schuylkill Canal, with just a small red house and another bridge that is reflected in the river or in the canal. And I was drawn by the light and the colors here. It was a beautiful, crisp day. And at that time of year, the light is perfect for photography. You get the blue sky and the puffy white clouds, and not the sort of dullness we get in the summer in this area. So that crispness and the colors were what drew me for this picture. Next slide. Now, the next 3 were on a much more gloomy, foggy morning, and we start with trees in fog along the bank of the Schuylkill River, and the mood and just the stillness of this appealed to me, with the trees completely bare, just in silhouette. Next slide. And then a slightly more complex composition, but also trees in fog further down the river. Here you can make out there are actually 2 rows of trees that are in turn reflected in the river. So we've got essentially 4 rows of trees. And I was able to pull out that contrast in post-processing, so you can see them a little more precisely than the naked eye could really see it on the day. But you get a sense of the depth of the fog and the interest of the scenery around the river there. Next slide. And then this next one, on that same day, zooms in closer to do an abstract with the reflections of the tree branches reflected in the canal, which was actually very muddy. But in post-processing, I was able to pull out the pinker tones and the bluer tones to give a more pleasing color palette than, to be honest, the real thing actually had. So that's a more abstract image. Next slide. Moving on to 3 that really focus on individual trees. This is a bough over the Perkiomen Creek, and I love the way it comes diagonally into the frame and just sort of hangs there gracefully with a sort of Japanese feel to it, and is framed against the blue reflection in the river, and then the reflection of the banks of the creek actually either side, so that the bough itself is sort of framed in the reflection. Next slide. This is a magnificent white oak. We're now out at the Bryn Coed Preserve, which is near Phoenixville in Chester County. And this white oak is over 100 years old, estimated. It's in the National Registry of White Oaks, apparently. And this particular view of it gives you the path leading up to it. So you have the leading line of the path that leads into the image, and then that nice row of trees behind it. But it's truly a magnificent specimen that can actually be seen by the road, but well worth a trip to Bryn Coed Preserve out there near Phoenixville. Next slide. Next one is in Cheslin Preserve. These are preserves that are maintained by Natural Lands Trust, which is a private organization that purchases land for preservation and does a wonderful job preserving the land and maintaining hiking trails. So I was hiking here in Cheslin Preserve, and the trees here I just found magnificent and dramatic in their solitariness. So I converted the colored image into black and white, which is very easy to do in post-processing. Next slide. This shows another view of Cheslin Preserve, the hiking trail meandering up the hill, the rolling hillside, and the curves was what drew me here, as well as the rows of trees and the bright fall light. Next slide. A very different scene in the deciduous woodlands that you find in, this is McCaig Preserve near Villanova, but a very similar landscape in Tyler Arboretum or Ridley Creek, where it's deciduous trees which leave this carpet, a wonderful carpet of red-toned leaves, and then the vertical tree trunks cast beautiful shadows in the evening light. And that was what I liked about this image. Final slide. And this is the one you see in my background on Zoom. It is just an abstract of the trees' reflections in the creek alongside Cheslin Preserve. It's a gently moving stream, and so you get those pretty ripples, and the line of trees on the bank cast reflections in the stream. So that's the end of my show. They're shown here all in 16 by 20 matted, but as Jared mentioned, I print my own images and I can print any size that anybody might be interested in. I use all archival inks and archival papers, and they can be matted, framed or unframed, whatever anyone might prefer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. A round of applause now for our artists, please. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Hooray. Yay. Now people can unmute themselves if you wish, and we can start a lively conversation. I can sort of keep this screen here, so if there are pieces people want to look at more closely, I can bring them up. I think that's all I need to say. Artists, do you have any questions for our audience at all that you would want to ask? Or does anyone have a question that they want to ask?
We don't have a question, but we're in our car and we have to go. But I loved all of it. It was so worth sitting in the car watching it on my iPhone because we didn't get home in time. But to all three of you, we just loved it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
I have a
Yeah,
question for Patricia.
if it was a dedication to Mike, you all did a heavenly job.
So who?
I have a question for Patricia. What format camera are you using for Bridge Over the Schuylkill and Lockkeeper's House?
These are actually all shot with my iPhone. I have the new iPhone 12 Pro Max, which has an amazing new sensor. It has 3 lenses and it enables you to shoot in RAW, which for those of you who aren't familiar with different formats in photography, when the camera actually takes the image, what is called RAW is the actual capture. And normally on a cell phone, what you will see is that capture converted by some algorithm in the software to a JPEG, and that's pretty much what you're stuck with. But when you get the image in RAW, you can take it into Lightroom or some other program and adjust the tonalities and make adjustments in it without degrading the quality of the image. So you get big images that can be printed large and that you can really have the same flexibility with as you do with an image that comes out of a full frame camera. So it's really a wonderful tool to have with you if you're hiking, because it's just a cell phone. It's not the weight of a full frame camera.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Patricia and her photography? How many times do you think you would have shot the bridge over the Schuylkill to get that one shot?
I think I have 3 or 4 images of it that are somewhat similar. And really they only differ in how much twig there was in the way of the, I was sort of dodging around the twigs because I wanted to see as much as I could of the reflection. And there is a lot of brush along the path there. So I was kind of almost falling into the river. But otherwise, it was just a beautiful day. That is the thing, the light is really wonderful in fall. So that's the time to go out and photograph around here.
Thank you.
Someone may know what the white is on this bridge. I have no idea. It seems in the wrong places to be pigeon poop, but
it's very similar to the white on the Columbia Bridge further down the Schuylkill in Fairmount Park proper.
Probably salt, don't you think? With
I don't know.
the water freezing and
I
then
assume
melting.
it's a railroad bridge.
yeah, I think it's a railway bridge, Charlie, you're right.
And so is the Columbia Bridge down in Fairmount Park. And it looks very similar materials and similar white markings.
Okay.
That doesn't mean I know what it is. I'm just saying it's not uncommon apparently.
Huh.
Patricia, when you're shooting, do you look for your composition in the initial shot, or do you back out and let yourself do the composition in post-processing?
These were not cropped at all. I don't think any of them were cropped. So it's the composition is all in camera. What I have adjusted in some of them in post-processing is like the contrast in the tree reflections in fog. That one you really couldn't see how much detail there was in the reflections, but in Lightroom, you're able, as you well know, Charlie, to pull out more contrast. And that really revealed those 4 rows of trees, which I was delighted with. So it's that sort of thing I'm doing in post-processing. It's bringing out contrast, bringing out different tonalities. The abstract one with the tree reflections, that was really rather ugly, muddy brown water that I was able to pull out the pinks.
I have a question for Merle. First of all, you guys, these are fabulous. All of you did really beautiful work. Merle, when you put together your materials, do you have a vision for what you're going for, or are you inspired by the materials that you decide to use?
It's kind of both. Sometimes I have a definite idea, and sometimes I just start playing around with it, and boom, I end up with something. But one thing I will say, and I don't know if this relates to either Patricia or Cheryl's work, is that at the end of the day, no matter what I'm putting together, it is overshadowed big time by the engineering of the project. So you can have a great idea, you want to put it together this way or that way, but unless you can understand how to physically put it together, mechanically put it together, and kind of enhance the vision that you think you had, you really kind of can't move right or left without the mechanics of it. So that for me, and sometimes it's the engineering that pushes me into a direction as well, because I don't always know. And in fact, sometimes I'll think of pieces that I want to use, but before I even allow myself to fantasize about the design, I probably spend as much or more time thinking about how I'm going to put it together.
Thank you.
Merle, I had a question too. And I see that you have several armatures. Is that how you say it? The net part that goes around the neck?
Yes.
They're very similar?
Yes.
So do you start with, you must start with the decorative part of the necklace first, and then decide what it's going to go on?
Not always. That sounds very wishy-washy. Sometimes, like for instance, if you look at the black Batuto glass, the disc, I mean, I kind of knew that I wanted to have just a very simplistic round armature for that. And sometimes I grapple with, if you look at the fishing float on the left, I'm really torn sometimes between using a round armature, like I have one here, but I just finished one where it's long. So the fishing float is weighted and it looks like a V. So the V in the neck piece, it's part of the look. And I kind of grapple between what I think looks better, or maybe they both look okay. But sometimes I will have a definite idea that this one I knew would always be rounded. But I try to get away from it sometimes, just to do something different.
Well, the other thing I think I see about those is that they lend themselves to different necklines, right? I mean, people can
They
wear them at
do.
different lengths and different.
They do. Just about all of them are adjustable. And when someone buys one of my pieces, they fit them to their neck, when they take it off, it almost looks a little misshapen. But when they put it on, it matches exactly with their clavicle and their neckline and the width of their chest. So I like there to be some flexibility to them. Now, like the Bakelite one, that one basically is not adjustable, but some of the pieces don't necessarily lend themselves to that, but I try to make them adjustable in some way.
Thank you.
I just wanted to introduce myself and thank Cheryl Schlencker, who's been my friend for 50 years, actually, she and Paul. And unfortunately, I missed her. I'm glad I'm getting a chance to see her work. I saw it go by, but I really, really enjoyed, what I got to see of Merle. I'm probably mispronouncing your name, and Patricia.
No, Merle is right.
Okay. And I particularly love the contrast of the black and white, like you brought out. There were two pieces in particular that were very stunning. I'm sort of an intensity junkie, and so I really like contrast. And those pieces brought that out. And the photography, well, first of all, there's the extra bonus of your wonderful accent, Patricia. It's delightful to listen to it. And, I really, really liked, the pictures. I love fog. And, you captured that in just a wonderful way. And the way you modified the one, so you brought out a little colors, I thought that was really great.
Well,
Anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge you, and I'm so happy that I was able to be in the audience, so to speak.
Thank you. I'm sorry you missed Cheryl's presentation. Perhaps, Cheryl, you could say a little bit. I don't know, just, I think it's so interesting the way you've arranged them in three, and perhaps just saying a little more about how that idea came to you, Cheryl.
I think I'll get back to Cliff. Thank you, Cliff.
You're welcome. I did notice, I guess that this is going to be available, presentation, is that accurate?
The presentation can be, we can make it available, sure. If you want to be,
that way,
if you want to hear it.
I don't have to miss what Cheryl, I came in a little late, so I missed Cheryl, but I would enjoy that as well, so.
Absolutely, and we do have a video on both websites that have, that's a little more produced, that will have Cheryl talking about the process of actually making these pieces, one of these pieces, which is very interesting, so.
Years
yes,
ago.
I
we'll
would
make
like
it
to
available.
see that also. I miss Cheryl in the beginning as well.
So if you go to the actual, probably the website that you found this link on, there are 3 videos there. And any of our 3 of our artists either showed all of these pieces or in Cheryl's case, talked about the making of one of these pieces. But you can also see all of the pieces there in the video.
Cheryl, I have a question for you about your use of collage in these paintings, because sometimes I wouldn't know that they were collages if you hadn't said that. How do you incorporate, what kind of materials and how do you incorporate them in to make them as a unified painting?
Well, can you hear me? Am I talking?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have about 14,000 old paintings and keep them handy. So I look through them for a color that I might be looking for or a shape, and then I rip them up basically and keep them according to in files according to the colors. So if I'm looking for a light blue, I look through my file and there is a wonderful light blue that has some good patina in it and a little bit of changeover and stuff. And I'll just take that piece and rip it up and throw it on what I'm working on, and bingo, something happens. So a lot of times I'll just take an old painting. Now, Stephanie, you have bought a painting of mine that I have actually painted over with pieces from old paintings. So you have an archaeological Cheryl Schlencker there. But, and I do make some pieces. I have this deli paper that's a really nice thin paper, and I can print on it and scratch on it and make paint markings on it and then cut it up and put it into my paintings. So they're just additions to my paintings. They're not actually, like the tapestry one isn't exactly a painting woven in there. It's a painting I started and then I laid strips on it of old paintings. So it's just, you know, kind of eclectic. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question here from Renee. Renee, did you want to say something?
Yes, please. I'm Mike Berman's cousin.
Oh, hi, Renee.
Hi, Merle. How are you?
Nice to actually see you. We've been emailing.
Yes. I wanted to thank, in particular, Liz McLaren for sending me the information about you and about this meeting so that I was able to be here. I'm not real computer oriented. I had a little trouble getting in. So I too missed Cheryl, but I saw the last two. And it's so well done. And I'm sure Mike would have been very proud, as he was, of everything you did, because when I talked to him, he talked a lot about all of you. And I just wanted to share that with you. So thank you.
I'm glad you're here. Yes, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike was always so dependable. He was at every event we had. He was so supportive. He
was special.
And we're doing several things to honor Mike, and
good. He
Sort of a
deserves
comment, question for Merle.
Yeah, sure.
I have some dear friends that live in Rio, in Brazil. And my friend's wife, I used to teach, was a professor of architecture, but then she shifted into, concurrently was doing what she calls clutches, which were like purses. But like you know, she's very concerned about not wasting stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I didn't know if that was kind of an international that you've discovered. There's a sort of community of folks doing that, or?
Well, I think that there are, but for me personally, like Cheryl, I've been doing art my entire life, ever since I was a little girl. And you could often find me in my bedroom looking in my trash can, fishing things out and making collages. That I live for that. And I was like, you know, a million years ago. But there's something about repurposing. First of all, it's good for the environment. And I am very conscious of that, especially with, you know, with the silks and because all of this stuff ends up in a landfill. And it's just making me think of something that I just want to put out there about repurposing. There are a lot of companies that are investing money in like Stella McCartney is one. She's working with Adidas, and they have figured out how to take their old garments wherever they come from, and they figured out a way to liquefy them and turn them back into yarn so that they can use them again. And many companies are trying to figure out ways to reuse, you know, the things that they have. And I was astounded to hear how much textiles is probably like one of the worst. And the other thing too is, I know I'm like off topic here a little, but the other thing too is that when you buy something in cotton and it's no longer useful to you and it ends up in a landfill, whatever chemicals were used to make that cotton are still in that cotton, and they end up in the ground, in the landfill. So while my repurposing started out as something fun to do, I realized that it's 5 o'clock. I realize I have a responsibility as well. So it's not only fun like flea markets, but you know, it tends to be helpful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question for Cheryl. I heard you say that you paint over your canvas. How many times can you do that? Repurpose your canvas?
You're muted, Cheryl.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you can paint forever on top. You'll find the old masters have paintings underneath theirs. I do protect my paintings on the top with a varnish so that they can't be scraped off after, you know, if I do one over the other.
Mm-hmm. And how do you keep track of 1,400 in your files?
I do have a big file thing that's horizontal, and then I just stick them in there. And I do have a lot of paintings everywhere. If you have an extra room in your house, I would like to rent it.
Oh my! Well, they're wonderful.
Thank you.
I have
Everybody's
a question.
was wonderful.
I have a question for Cheryl. Am I being heard?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. I'm looking at the 9 pictures and I'm just blown away by the colors, especially this time of year and this year. But I wanted to, you know, I'm not an artist. I've painted a little, and I can tell that using this many colors, I think, in one painting requires a lot of control and a lot of knowledge about the relationship of different colors and so forth. And I wonder if in your earlier years as an artist, you were more monochromatic than you are now.
Well, Cindy, I have never been monochromatic.
Okay.
I do try sometimes to do a monochromatic thing, but I just can't do it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. I love looking at them.
Thank you.
This has been such a treat today.
Well,
Cheryl, I noticed.
It's good to see you.
Cheryl, I noticed in your work that you use a lot of complementary colors. Is that something that you set out to do often?
Well, I think I don't know. I have a color wheel, and I know that things across from each other, like blue, green, and red, make a gray. And I'm really trying to use more gray in my paintings, which you'll see in the last piece that I did. But it's hard. I don't know. It's just intuitive, I think.
Okay.
Can't answer that, Charlie.
Okay. Well, I mean, I see a lot of it. I see a lot of, red against green and blue against orange, and which is a very harmonious, and beautiful combination.
I do know one thing, and that is the rods and cones in your brain. The rods are value, dark and light, and the cones are color. and the rods are more, so that we don't see color at night, but we do see values like darks and lights. So I'm finding that very interesting, and I'm going to work on that.
Cool.
Neat.
Do we have any other questions for our artists? Otherwise, thank you all very much for coming. We are going to make, for those who missed the beginning of this, we will post this to both the MAC galleries or the main MAC site. We'll post it to YouTube. We'll send out links and things like that. And then we hope to see you again next month on March 13th at 4, when you will see the complete gallery making a show, which will be fantastic. I think that's it. Anyone else have anything they need to say? Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Nice presentation. Thank you.
Jared.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Very nice show, everyone. It'd be good to see you in person, but this was very nice.
Thank you.